In our headlines on this Wednesday, November 13th, here in South Korea, the shape of Trump's second administration is taking form, with hardliners to lead homeland security and foreign policy, and two allies to head a new department for government efficiency. And the price of Bitcoin pushes past new highs, soaring well above $90,000. But here, the South Korean bourse continues to lose ground amid concerns over Trump's trade policy. Meanwhile, the Biden administration on Tuesday confirms the involvement of North Korean troops in active combat against Ukrainian soldiers alongside their Russian counterparts in the Kursk region. Some of the incoming Trump administration's top defense and diplomatic authorities have been named, and their common ground appears to be America first. Our Lee Soo-jin starts us off.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's picks for key positions signal a hawkish security and foreign policy stance for a second term. Trump on Tuesday local time tapped 44-year-old Fox News host Pete Hegseth, an Army veteran who served in Afghanistan and Iraq, as the Secretary of Defense, also a reflection of the importance he places on the way his message is conveyed in the media. This follows Trump naming military veteran and Florida Representative Mike Waltz, who had been mentioned as a candidate for the defense secretary position, as his national security advisor. Trump in a statement said that Waltz had been a strong champion of his America First foreign policy agenda and calling him a nationally recognized leader in national security, as well as an expert on threats posed by China, Russia, Iran, and global terrorism. Waltz, a 50-year-old Florida native, served for 27 years in the U.S. Army Special Forces and the U.S. National Guard, serving multiple combat tours in Afghanistan, the Middle East, and Africa, before being elected to Congress in 2018. Waltz's selection indicates that the Trump administration will take a hardline stance with China, as Waltz has openly called China an existential threat to U.S. interests. And when asked about how Trump might respond to North Korea supplying Russia with weapons, he said that those shipments should be intercepted, also suggesting secondary sanctions on Chinese and Russian energy companies that fund North Korea. Trump also announced on Tuesday that he has nominated 69-year-old former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, a staunch supporter of Israel, as the next ambassador to Israel. The nomination comes as Trump pledged on the campaign trail to align U.S. foreign policy more with Israel's. He also chose another longtime Trump loyalist, 52-year-old South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, to lead the border and immigration crackdown as his next Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. And Florida Senator and China hawk Marco Rubio is being seen as a likely pick for Trump's Secretary of State, further adding to expectations that U.S. foreign and national security policy priorities will take a tougher stance on global conflicts. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, tech billionaire Elon Musk and former Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy have been tapped to head a new department of government efficiency. Our Choi Soo-young has details.
Elon Musk, the Tesla CEO, has joined the second Donald Trump administration. On Tuesday local time, President-elect Trump announced in a statement that Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy would lead a new department of government efficiency. Trump stated that both will pave the way to dismantle government bureaucracies, slash access regulations, cut wasteful expenditure, and restructure federal agencies for his administration. He stressed this will be the core of the Save America movement. Ramaswamy, the co-leader with Musk, is an Indian-American biotechnology entrepreneur. He was a former Republican primary candidate but participated in the presidential race with Trump. Notably, at the Republican National Convention held in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in July, he called for strengthening relationship with allies like South Korea to reduce dependency on China. The exact form of the new department is still unclear. However, Trump promised drastic change to the federal government. He stated that it would provide advice and guidance from outside of government to reduce spending and address bureaucracies. He also promised during his campaign to cut as many as 100,000 government positions, now a task assigned to Musk and Ramaswamy. Meanwhile, Musk, who has quickly risen as one of Trump's closest allies, is expanding his influence in the second term even more broadly with this new appointment. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
And Trump trade is driving the price of Bitcoin to new highs. It broke past another record on Tuesday, soaring above 90,000 US dollars. Our Isingja covers the latest rally.
Bitcoin, the largest cryptocurrency by market cap, continues its winning streak, this time reaching another all-time high and surpassing 90,000 US dollars for the first time. According to US-based crypto exchange Coinbase, the price of Bitcoin briefly surpassed 90,000 US dollars just before 6 a.m. Wednesday Korea Standard Time, before falling back to the $88,000 range. Since the U.S. presidential election last week, which saw Donald Trump returning to the Oval Office in January, the price of Bitcoin has increased by about 30%. And it's not just Bitcoin and Ethereum. Meme coins have also been soaring since Trump's victory last week. Dogecoin has more than doubled its price since last week's U.S. presidential election. Another meme coin, Shiba Inu, has seen a trade volume comparable to that of Bitcoin. According to Upbeat, the combined trade volume of Dogecoin and Shiba Inu was 4 times that of Bitcoin. The recent meme coin rally comes as Tesla CEO Elon Musk has long supported Dogecoin. However, experts warn of risks involving meme coins, especially during an overheated market. 이승재, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the local bourse in sharp contrast continues to lose ground amid concerns over the broader implications of an American-first trade policy under a second Trump leadership. Our Zhuhai reports.
Despite the Trump rally in the U.S., South Korea's stock market is being left behind, struggling to recover since the former president's election win. According to the Korea Exchange on Wednesday, the benchmark Kospi lost over 65 points, or 2.64%, to close at around 2,417. This drop, mostly driven by massive sell-offs by foreign investors and institutions, marks the lowest closing since November last year. The tech-heavy Kosdaq fell below the 700 mark, slumping by 2.94%. This comes a day after the Kospi dropped almost 2%, falling below the 2,500 mark for the first time in 3 months since the Black Monday for South Korea's stock market in August. Experts say that South Korea's economic vulnerabilities are reflected in the local financial market, especially due to its heavy reliance on exports and sectors such as semiconductors. Meanwhile, Samsung Electronics shares dropped 4.5% to 50,600 Korean won, their lowest price since June 2020. The stock has now fallen for 4 consecutive trading days. There are growing concerns that uncertainty in the semiconductor sector could increase when President-elect Trump takes office early next year. A proponent of protectionism, Trump is pushing to repeal the CHIPS Act, which provides subsidies to companies building semiconductor plants in the U.S. If these subsidies are removed, it could disrupt Samsung's plans for its U.S. factory. With Trump expected to tighten U.S. trade policies, the Korean won continues to weaken against the U.S. dollar. The won closed on Wednesday at 1,406.6, the rate rising by 3.1 Korean won. 신하영, Arirang News.
Also, on the local front, employment expanded at a slower pace in October, dropping below the 100,000 mark for the first time in 4 months. Our business correspondent Nahariya reports.
Employment in South Korea continued to rise in October, but at a slower pace than in the past few months. Data released by Statistics Korea on Wednesday showed that just over 28.8 million people were employed last month, up 83,000 from the same month the year before. This is the first time in 4 months that the country's job growth has fallen below the 100,000 mark, after it recovered to this figure in July and stayed there for 3 consecutive months. The slowdown comes due to a slump in employment in the retail, construction, and agriculture and fisheries sectors. Retail and wholesale jobs in particular recorded their highest decline in over 3 years, as they fell by 148,000 year-on-year. A spokesperson from the agency attributed this to fundamental changes in the industry as opposed to weakened domestic demand. It's clear that the retail industry is declining primarily due to changes in the industrial structure. With the rise of online shopping, e-commerce, unmanned stores, and self-checkout systems, the retail sector experienced a temporary plateau for about a year, but is ultimately on a downward trend.
Employment in retail and wholesale has been falling for 8 consecutive months, and jobs in construction for 6 straight months. During a joint task force meeting with related ministries on Wednesday, the Ministry of Economy and Finance pledged to actively provide necessary support measures for industries with poor employment, including construction. On the other hand, the healthcare and education service sectors added jobs year-on-year by 97,000 and 84,000 respectively. South Korea's employment landscape is also presenting a mixed bag, with a notable divergence between the younger and older generations. While older workers are increasingly filling job vacancies, the youth employment rate continues to decline. Individuals aged 60 and above saw a significant increase of 257,000 in employment, while those aged between 15 and 29 years old fell by 182,000, marking 24 months of a consecutive decline. 문혜련, Arirang News.
The Biden administration has confirmed the involvement of North Korean troops in Russia's military offensive against Ukraine. Our Kim Jong-sil has the latest.
The U.S. State Department says North Korean soldiers are now fighting alongside Russian forces against Ukraine. Principal Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel confirmed Tuesday local time that over 10,000 North Korean troops have been sent to Russia, with most stationed in the contested Kursk region. Patel noted that Russia faces challenges in working with these forces, including interoperability and language barriers. However, experts in South Korea suggest that may not be a significant issue.
Because the front line is so wide, North Korean troops can be used wherever they're needed, either as a kind of vanguard or even as cannon fodder in frontline positions. So the language barrier likely won't be a significant issue.
Professor Zhang also explained the motivation behind Russia's all-out efforts in the Kursk region.
Essentially, they want to prevent any loss of their own territory while quickly neutralizing risks. Their goal is to secure more of the 20% of land they occupy without losing any of their existing territory.
The Russian and North Korean forces' offensive in Kursk appears to be accelerating in line with the re-election of President-elect Donald Trump, who has been promising to put an early end to the war in Ukraine. This has sparked concerns across Europe, with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte raising the alarm on Tuesday.
Russia working together with North Korea, Iran and China is not only threatening Europe, it threatens peace and security, yes, here in Europe, but also in the Indo-Pacific and in North America. We need to raise the cost for Putin and is enabling authoritarian friends by providing Ukraine with the support it needs to change the trajectory of the conflict.
Experts say Europe may be concerned as the U.S. could weaken its commitment to European defense, especially with the return of Trump.
If you look at the new nominee for the U.S. Secretary of Defense, who has been advocating for cuts to overseas troops, a reduction in Ukraine support could signal a shift in U.S. policy, weakening its commitment to Europe.
Seoul has not yet confirmed the combat engagement but stated that it is closely monitoring the situation. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, in the Middle East, 2 residents in the northern coastal city of Nahariya in Israel were killed by rockets launched by Lebanon-based militant group Hezbollah on Tuesday, local time. According to Israeli authorities, both of the fatalities were men in their 50s, and 2 other men in their 30s were also hurt in another impact. Some 10 rockets were launched from Lebanon and a few were intercepted by Israel. This latest assault came hours after a drone struck a kindergarten in northern Israel. No casualties were reported. In other news, creating an inclusive social environment also means lowering barriers to cultural entertainment for people with disabilities. And our An Sung-jin has more on such efforts in this following report.
검은 치마를 입고 도로를 힘차게 달려가는 소녀의 하반신과 그녀와 함께 달리는 검은 고양이.
This graphics pad helps Komi-suk read comics. For the visually impaired, imagination is needed to interpret images. Some books are offered in Braille or through voice text, but this can miss out on the non-textual aspects.
Braille is not enough, and for audio narration, the character varies too much depending on the narrator.
That's where these interactive devices come into place. This is the world's first smart tactile graphics display. It was created through a project from the Korea Creative Content Agency LA. The display works by providing solutions to reduce information discrepancy. For example, with webtoons, it recreates comics as graphics. It also has a text-to-braille panel on the bottom for details that are not illustrated.
I try to focus on eliminating the unnecessary components to reduce any confusion. It's sometimes difficult to express exactly what we see through tactile display.
Users highlight the need to carefully select which aspects of content to interpret.
I think what's important is that the information gap between the visually impaired and those that aren't is reduced. The key for barrier-free is keeping the original content as much as possible, but also simplifying it.
Movies are another area where barriers must be removed so that everyone can enjoy content.
나랑 같이 영화 보러 갈래? If so, why not head to this barrier-free film festival where narrations are both spoken and written, so viewers have a better understanding of what they're watching.
The 2024 Seoul Barrier-Free Film Festival screened nearly 40 movies. Hosted by the Korean Barrier-Free Films Committee, it works on producing, distributing, and screening barrier-free films.
It's not about making something for the disabled. Barrier-free is something that everyone can enjoy. Just like making subtitles for movies that we export, audio description or subtitles for the deaf should be essential.
Moving forward, all of those in the field have emphasized the need for more IT devices that can provide these contents.
If those in the movie industry can have more interest in a barrier-free environment, we will be able to have the same experience as others, especially establishing more systematic efforts for devices that can play barrier-free movies.
Through those efforts, hopefully in the future, everyone will be able to enjoy the latest blockbuster without barriers. Han Sung-jin, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. A car rammed into a large group of people in a southern Chinese city on Monday night, killing dozens with the attack on a scale not seen in the country in decades. 35 people were killed and over 40 injured by an SUV that plowed into groups of people exercising at a stadium in Zhuhai city. Chinese police arrested the driver, named as 62-year-old Mr. Fan, as he tried to flee the scene. According to witnesses, Fan drove into the sports stadium at around 8 p.m. as people were exercising on the running track loop and deliberately ran people down. Police said that Fan is now in a coma from self-inflicted wounds after he stabbed himself with a knife in his car before being arrested. Authorities also say a preliminary investigation suggests Fan acted out of dissatisfaction over a divorce settlement. Amid a nationwide outcry, Chinese President Xi Jinping said that all-out efforts have been ordered to treat the injured, adding there would be severe punishment for the assailant. The leader of the Church of England, Archbishop of Canterbury Justin Welby, resigned on Tuesday, following a report that the church covered up a prolific child abuser. Welby faced calls to resign on Monday after an independent review last week revealed that he and other church officers were aware of Barrister John Smith's abuse of boys and young men dating back to the 1970s. The independent review said that by at least 2013, high-level members of the Church of England, including Welby, knew about Smith's abuse of boys. Smith was a British High Court lawyer and senior member of a Christian charity and reportedly abused more than 100 children and young men for decades, including in Zimbabwe and South Africa, where he died in 2018. The review also said the police were told of the abuse between 2013 and 2016, but church leaders failed to provide a formal report. A full police investigation was launched in 2017, following a Channel 4 documentary that revealed Smith's abuse. Global oil company Shell won an appeal against a landmark case in the Dutch courts on Tuesday, overturning a previous ruling that Shell must cut its absolute carbon emissions by 45% by 2030. The presiding judge of an appeal court in The Hague said Shell is already en route to meeting its emissions reduction targets, adding that Shell is already doing what the plaintiff, Friends of the Earth Netherlands, is asking. The judge said that while the oil giant has a responsibility to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, it already achieved a 31% reduction by 2023, and that Scope 1 and 2 corporate emissions would be reduced by 50% by 2030 compared to 2016. The Aga Khan Emerald, a brooch gifted by Prince Sadruddin Aga Khan to his bride Nina Daya in 1960, was sold for $8.8 million at a Christie's auction in Geneva on Tuesday. Set with an extremely rare 37-carat emerald piece in the center, surrounded by diamonds, it was initially sold to Van Cleef & Arpels in 1969 after Daya took her own life in 1965. The piece fetched around 10% more than its highest price estimate of between $6 to $8 million at Christie's magnificent jewel sale. Kim Xiang, Arirang News.
With warm spring-like weather continuing during the day, there will be no worries about the cold tomorrow, which is the college entrance exam day, the 수능. However, when the sun goes down, the temperature will drop quickly. The daily temperature differences are very large at around 15 degrees, so please take a warm jacket to avoid catching a cold. Rain will begin in the late afternoon on the west coast under cloudy skies. Although the amount of rainfall shouldn't be too large, there is a high possibility of rain in most parts of the country by the time the 수능 test ends, so you should take an umbrella. The rain will mostly stop on Friday morning. Tomorrow, Daejeon will start off at 9 degrees, Busan 13 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 19 in Daegu, Gwangju and Gyeongju 20 degrees. It will be mild like spring until the end of this week, but sub-zero morning cold will come around early next week, mainly in inland areas. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, and today we touch upon the Hallyu highlights making headlines elsewhere.